Welcome everyone to the author interview with Colleen Cambridge. Her book, Murder at Mallowan Hall, is pubbing at the end of October. And at the booth, you can click a button for signed ARCs and finished books and be taken to a link to a form to enter to win a signed copy of the ARC. I encourage you to do that. And also for anyone who has questions, please put them into the chat. We will monitor them, and before the end of the half hour here, we'll make sure that any questions that are entered get to Colleen. So without further ado, I pass you off to my colleague, Larissa Ackerman.
Hi, everybody. My name is Larissa, and I'm a communications manager at Kensington Publishing, where I work with our fabulous historical mystery authors, including Colleen Cambridge, who is the author of Murder at Mallowan Hall, a Phyllida Bright mystery, which releases on October 26, 2021 in hardcover. So the ARC is not hardcover, but it will be in hardcover. Colleen Cambridge is a pseudonym for New York Times and New York Times and USA Today bestselling author whose books have been translated into more than 8 languages. She lives in the Midwest and is hard at work at her next Phyllida Bright mystery. Murder at Mallowan Hall is the first in an exciting new historical mystery series starring Phyllida Bright, Agatha Christie's fictional housekeeper and amateur sleuth whose long admiration of the famous crime writers detectives help solve the case when mysterious deaths at Mallowan Hall baffle even her famous employer. So if you attended the mystery editors panel this morning, you heard Colleen's editor, Wendy McCurdy, talk about why she loves Murder at Mallowan Hall, and we're excited to have the author here as well. And she will be telling us more about the book and why she decided to write it. And as Matt said earlier, if anyone has any questions, please drop them in the chat and we will be answering at the end of Colleen's talk. So Colleen, are you ready to chat about your book?
Oh yes, indeed, for sure, yes.
So tell us about Murder at Mallowan Hall, like your inspiration for it, the writing process.
Well, Wendy was the one that kind of came up with the idea of what would happen if Agatha Christie herself was involved in a murder, an actual murder mystery. Not that she was the victim or the murderer, of course, but that she was involved in it. And the idea kind of blossomed into a sort of Agatha Christie meets Downton Abbey sort of a vibe where, I thought it would be more interesting to have the main character not be Agatha Christie because we kind of know her story. And I feel that at least when I'm reading series, I like to read a series where I'm watching the character's story, the main character's life evolve, their relationships and their skills and what they experience. So the idea of her housekeeper kind of made sense. And I thought it was just super fun to have a book where a body is found in Agatha Christie's own library. Obviously, The Body in the Library is one of her most famous books, starring Jane Marple. And I thought, well, there's a lot of opportunity to put Easter eggs related to Agatha Christie in this kind of a series. So what would be a good character to be an amateur sleuth made sense to me when we started thinking about, the housekeeper. And because at a manor at that time, so we're talking in the 30s, I set the book like right at the beginning of the 30s, the 1930s, the housekeeper was pretty powerful. She managed the whole budget of the whole house. She managed all of the maids and made sure the household ran properly. And the butler managed the male servants for the most part, but she managed the money. The butler also managed the wine cellar, which I always thought should be interesting. I wish they would flip it. I could maybe flip it and let the housekeeper have the key to the wine cellar. I mean, just think of the fun I could have with that. Anyway, I grew up reading Agatha Christie. I've read just about every one of her books. I've read almost all of the Hercule Poirot stories. I refuse to read Curtain, which is the last book, because he dies in that one. So I'm not ever going to read that book until I'm dying, probably. And I've read most of the Jane Marple books. I've read many of the Tuppence and Tommy books, a lot of the standalones. So I was already a huge fan of Agatha Christie and murder mysteries in general when this idea kind of came to me. And I loved the idea. I mean, who wouldn't want to, try and do the tongue-in-cheek sort of thing? We've got the murder writer with a body in her own house who has no idea what's going on with the mystery and the body and doesn't really want to be involved. You know, Agatha says in the book, it's way easier for me to create the clues than to try and figure out what's a clue in real life. So this is not my idea of a good time. But at the same time, Phyllida Bright, who is the housekeeper, you know, she's got a house to run. And not only that, do we have, they're having a house party for the weekend. So we have the whole idea of, if you've read The Mysterious Affair at Styles, which is a very similar setup where you've got everybody in the house and somebody dies, you know, that's kind of a classic cozy mystery. But we've got the housekeeper who's trying to run the household while she's got to deal with a dead body and all of the gossip that's going to be going on between all of her maids and the rest of the staff. You think they're going to be doing their jobs? No, they're going to be standing around talking about the dead body in the library. So that's kind of where the idea of the book kind of where it came from and how it evolved and why I thought it would be super fun to write the book. And one more thing I was going to mention, the housekeeper in such a large estate like that, if she has a well-trained and excellent staff, actually has a lot of downtime, which means that Phyllida Bright, Mrs. Bright, could be, you know, could have time to investigate clues and follow up on things. So, you know, that made sense for me. Like I couldn't have a parlor maid be doing it. I couldn't have a chambermaid be doing it because they're busy all day long and they have to do, you know, they have to follow their schedule. But the housekeeper, you know, if everybody's doing their job, she just kind of sits back like the lord of the manor and manages her serfs. So kind of worked out that way.
So you had mentioned that and Wendy mentioned this too on the panel, that the idea for the book was originally a kernel of her idea about having Agatha Christie as the sleuth, but you decided to create Phyllida Bright. What made you decide not to have Agatha as the sleuth? What opened up the possibilities more to have Phyllida be the sleuth?
Well, like, you know, Agatha Christie's a real person, so I didn't feel like making Agatha the main character would give me the flexibility and the, you know, to like have a lot of different things happen. First of all, she's happily married, so I can't have any sort of love relationship developing with her, and that is a staple, in my opinion, in many mystery series. You have some sort of, you know, romantic relationship usually, you know, developing between the main character and someone else. So really couldn't do that. I mean, I could certainly portray her marriage to Max Mallowan, which was far happier than her first marriage to Archie Christie. But also, as I said, you know, since she's a real person, I'm pretty limited in what I can do. And I'd rather have a character who I can create and have personality that I know because I'm creating the character. Otherwise, I have to try and stay in Agatha Christie's personality the whole time, which is a challenge because I've never met her and she's been gone for a while. So, and then, you know, again, so with Phyllida's job, I think, makes it more fun for her to be the detective anyway, because she isn't writing a book. She doesn't, you know, she just manages the household, so she can kind of get around and do things. It would be more noticeable if Agatha Christie was following clues and trying to track down a murderer, I think. And being a mystery writer myself, I feel like I can relate to Agatha's position of I make up the clues and put them where I want them and make the suspects do what I want them to do. I don't think I could do this in real life. I don't think I would be a good detective in real life. At the same time, I do think that many readers think that, you know, maybe we could be the detective in real life. Maybe I could follow the clues, because half the time we're trying to solve the mysteries that are being written, that we're reading, you know, rather than that, you know, we think we could do it because we've read so many of them. So I thought I would give Phyllida that sort of a confidence. Additionally, I didn't mention this, but Phyllida and Agatha were friends. They were friends during the war. And if you know anything about Agatha Christie's background, you know that she worked in the dispensary at the hospital during the war. And that's how she learned so much about poisons. So I developed a little bit of a backstory with Phyllida and Agatha, where they were friends at that time. And then Phyllida maybe went along and was at the front as a nurse. So they have some backstory as friends. And then one might wonder, why would someone who was a nurse take on a job as a housekeeper for her friend? And I'm not going to tell you why. Phyllida would tell you it's none of your business why she would do that. You might find out in later books, but Phyllida basically, she has her reasons for what she does, and that's what they are. So
I had a question about that. And I guess you can't tell me now.
I can't give the spoilers. Of course, that
Can't
assumes
spoil it.
yeah. No, she'll tell me it's nobody's business but her own, nor is it anybody's business what her age is or anything like that. No, and she and the butler, Mr. Dobble, they have a kind of a frenemy love-hate relationship. They're allies in the sense that the household needs to run properly and everything has to be, great for the Mallowans. But there's a little bit of competition between them because they're both powerful household figures. And the butler traditionally has been the one in charge of everything, even the housekeeper to some extent. But Mr. Dobble and Mrs. Bright, they just they have their moments. They have their moments.
Well, I'm thinking back because you had mentioned Downton Abbey, and I'm thinking back, and I realized that I do love the downstairs and what goes on downstairs more than whatever went on upstairs. It was so much more interesting to see the housekeepers, the butlers, and all their drama. So it'll be exciting to have a sleuth working in the downstairs.
Yes. And I mean, the whole setup of the servants, it's a little community unto themselves. So there's drama, there's it's like a soap opera, or it can be, it will develop that way as the series goes on. So you've definitely got all of the the maids and the footmen and the gardener and the surly chauffeur who just showed up on the scene in the middle of the book. I wasn't expecting Bradford to show up, but then he did. So there's like a community unto itself within the household. And as the series progresses, I see some of those characters maybe assisting Phyllida in some of her sleuthing tasks as well.
Yeah. So you mentioned that there's a little bit of back and forth with Phyllida and the butler, but can you give us a little bit of insight onto what the reader should expect the relationship between Phyllida and Agatha to look like? Are they friendly? Is there like a weirdness between them because she is being employed by Agatha Christie, but they were friends? Like, what should a reader expect about their relationship?
Well, I hope that the reader thinks that the relationship feels, real. Yeah, it is kind of weird with Agatha being Phyllida's boss, even though they were friends and basically, peers and colleagues back during World War I. I'm hoping it feels authentic in the sense that when Agatha and Phyllida are alone, there is a much more casual relationship between the two of them than there would normally be between a housekeeper and the mistress of the household. But at the same time, I feel like I just lost my train of thought. I just lost my train of thought.
Happens to me all the time.
Oh my gosh, I had a good point I was going to make. Oh, well, I think that Agatha knows Phyllida's reasons for doing what for taking on this job. And as I mentioned, it's not like it's not like she's scrubbing, the back steps or, washing eggs or, changing the sheets in the bedrooms. Phyllida is, she's a powerful individual within this household. So it's not like she's, doing menial work. She's actually managing. So she's a manager. She's like a CEO of the household with the managing the budget and everything else. So it's not like she's taken a step down, but it is probably questionable why she would do something like this, take a job like this. Agatha knows Phyllida's reasons at the same time as Phyllida knows what happened to Agatha when she disappeared for those 11 days that everybody talks about. So they're kind of in this situation, and that's really more alluded to in the book than actually said, but I'm saying it now. I think it's kind of one of those things where they respect each other's secrets and backgrounds and stories because they're close friends. So that's hopefully the readers will find the relationship authentic. They do sit down a couple times and have tea. They do talk about the murder, but Agatha's always like yearning to get back to working on her book that she's trying to write at the moment. So
that just gave me chills, knowing that she knew what happened during that time period. So I have a few more questions about the Agatha Christie thing, but I do want to just go into more about the manor itself. So I'll come back to those. But you describe Mallowan Hall as a modest manor house tucked in the rolling hills and lush forests of Devonshire. It's surprisingly modern for a country manor home with running water, indoor toilets, and electric lights, and is entirely of your own imagination. So why did you decide to set your mystery in a fictional home, and is it based on any real British manor homes?
Well, I decided to make it a fictional manor home because, frankly, Agatha wasn't living in a house that at that time that fit what I wanted to do with this series. You know, in order to have the housekeeper have the time to be solving mysteries and to have all of this Downton Abbey feel, you know, Agatha Christie didn't live in a huge mansion like that. She had several houses, in fact, one in London, one I can't remember, it's on the coast somewhere. So 2 or 3 different houses. And she and her husband, Max, also spent a lot of time in Egypt. They would go back and forth because he was an archaeologist. So in order to give this the Downton Abbey feel that I really wanted to bring to the story, because I wanted that community, I wanted people to understand that Phyllida, even though she's a housekeeper, she's a very strong, powerful, smart person who's got a big job that she's trying to deal with. And I didn't want to have to you know, find a home that worked in Agatha Christie's biography. It just didn't work. There was nothing like that at that time. So that was the main reason. Plus, you know, I can have a lot more. I can make the house the way I want it to be. You know, I made it as big as I wanted it. I created it the way I wanted it to be. I mean, there's orchards where you might find a dead body. There's forests where you might find a dead body. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity for dead bodies to show up in future stories.
When creating the house, did you map it out? Like, do you have like a blueprint where, or is it like all in your head or like written down?
A little bit of all of the above. I mean, each of the guest rooms have a name to them. So it makes it easier for them, like the, you know, the Daisy room and the Dahlia room. I can't even remember the rooms right now. I think there was a golden room or something like that. And I have it basically figured out by floor. And it looks a lot like Downton Abbey in my head. I'm just saying, you know, when I'm picturing some of these things, it does look a lot like Downton Abbey. I didn't base it on any particular manor house, mainly because I wanted it to be, I wanted to use it the way I wanted to use it. You know what I mean? I wanted to create it like it, as a mystery author, I like to create clues so I can use them later. So it's all a big, you know, I'm making it all up as I go.
Yeah, and it must be fun to just kind of be able to plan out almost possibly what your own dream home would be.
Exactly. Oh, and I do want to address the whole issue about the manor house being unusually modernized. What happened was a lot of the houses, you know, this house would have probably been built in the 1880s or maybe 1890s. And of course, they didn't have electricity or running water or anything like that. Many of the large manor houses did not get updated, but many of them did when very rich people would buy them. So you would have some of the women who would come over from the United States who were wealthy heiresses would come over and marry landed gentlemen, and they would have the money then to update the houses. So I also wanted the house to be updated because I wanted running water, I wanted electricity. It wasn't out of the norm for an older house to be updated, but it certainly wasn't, you know, that common. Any new houses that were being built in the 20s and 30s, of course, would already have the running water and the electricity built in, but it was very expensive to do that. So I tweaked, you know, fictional, or I tweaked historical accuracy a smidge, but not completely.
Speaking of, so again, we keep talking about Downton Abbey, which is a television show where the Abbey itself was a character. So how is Mallowan Hall its own character?
Well, I'm not sure if it's, I guess it's because, you know, it has its own, it's like its own little city. It's like its own self-enclosed, you know, entity. And so I think that it's a character because it is you know, an older structure that has been modernized. And I think we're dealing with a kind of a modern sort of character in Phyllida Bright. She's confident in who she is. She doesn't feel like she has to tell the males in her life, as like Mr. Dobble, or, you know, the chauffeur, Mr. Bradford, or even Inspector, wow, I can't think of the Inspector Cork. She doesn't have to tell them. She doesn't have to justify herself. In fact, she goes, you know, out of her way to make sure that the Scotland Yard inspector doesn't get her actual age written down, if you caught that in the book. So I think, you know, we have this kind of thing happening where we have this changing of from the the old ways to the new ways. We have an old building with updated modern technology. And so in that way, I feel like that character, the character of the manor house kind of, meshes with the character of Phyllida.
I almost just said that the inspector's name was Inspector Japp because that's who she compares him.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Good old Japp.
And I had another question while you were speaking, and it totally went over my head. So if I remember it again,
I can relate.
I will. It did happen to you a few minutes ago.
Oh yeah, it does.
So what were some of the here was my question. For the next installments in the series, you will be continuing to have it at the hall, most likely?
Well, actually, the next book in the series is going to be super fun. It will be the murder itself. The body is going to most likely, I'm in the process of working on it right now, is most likely going to be found at a small fete or a small festival in the village, which is adjacent, very close to the Manor Hall. It's the village of Listley, and there's going to be a big festival happening, and the festival is going to include some other mystery authors that were colleagues and peers of Agatha Christie at the time. And in fact, she did some projects with a couple other well-known mystery authors like Dorothy Sayers and so on. So it's going to be, I don't know if it's just going to be a book festival or just a festival, but there will be murder authors there selling their books. And so we'll have the connection to Agatha Christie and her staff. And of course, Phyllida is going to be involved in managing things because that's what she does. So most likely the body will end up at the festival. And it's going to be a festival filled with other crime writers. So that should be interesting as well. But Phyllida's home base will always be Mallowan Hall.
Mm-hmm. So. I love that idea of the festival and the murder. Mm-hmm. I'm excited for this series. So what were some of the most interesting facts that you discovered while you were researching for this time period and setting? And did you have anything that surprised you when you were researching about the way that large households were run during the 1930s?
Well, I always knew that the housekeeper, as I said multiple times already, was very powerful. She had a lot of responsibility. There was a lot that she had to do, especially when the house is very large. But what I didn't know was that the housekeeper, not the cook, was in charge of making all of the distillations that they might use, or the syrups, or the jams and the jellies. So she managed the maids that would make those, and she would oversee that. So they might have, just like rose distilled water for rose water in the bedrooms, or they might have, a sort of syrup that they would pour over, the scones or whatever. So she was in charge of that, even though that feels like it should be a cooking thing. It really wasn't. The other thing that I learned, or I became more comfortable with, was the idea of the different types of maids and where they fell in the hierarchy of the, of the household. You've got the kitchen maids, and within the kitchen maid, you've got the scullery maid, who's the lowest of low in the whole house. And she's the one that's out there, whitewashing the steps, the porch steps every morning. She's the one washing the eggs. She's the one getting up before anybody else and building all the fires in all the rooms. And then you go all the way up through the kitchen maids. They have their own hierarchy, who's been there longer. Then you've got the chambermaids, who are the ones that do the bedrooms. And then you've got the parlor maids, who are the ones that can be seen, meaning that they're on the main floor of the house. So that, if somebody comes in, there's a visitor and they might see them in the parlor, they're okay to be seen. And a lot of times there might be decisions made about how someone's appearance might affect whether they're going to be a chambermaid or a parlor maid. And their ability to, carry on a conversation, or how they speak, or anything like that, because that's how the British were. They wanted to present the best, what they considered the best front on the main floor. Other things that I found out was that a lot of times the owners of the mansion didn't want the maids to be seen. So maybe a chambermaid is cleaning a bedroom, and Susie forgot her bonnet, and so she runs upstairs to get it, although she probably would send her lady's maid. But just say she had to run upstairs and get something, and if the chambermaid was in there cleaning the room, a lot of households required that the maid leave the room, not speak to the daughter or whoever she was, let her get her item, and then they could go back in the room. So they were basically to be not even seen, not even heard. The other thing that I thought was important, and this is actually one of the things that helps Phyllida figure out what happened, is, the houses are big. And if you're a kitchen maid, you don't come up onto the main floors ever. The kitchen maids they don't come up. They don't leave their realm down there. So they don't really know what the rest of the house looks like or where anything is.
Oh.
Maybe a high level kitchen maid, like the first kitchen maid, might, if the footman and the butler and the housekeeper aren't available, might bring up a tray to a parlor or to the kitchen once or twice, but that's not their job. And they rarely come up from the kitchen. So you have these very isolated areas. And when you have a huge house like this, a lot of things can be going on and people can't always find their way around the house. So that becomes very instrumental in figuring out who the culprit was in the murder, in Murder at Mallowan Hall, that whole idea.
Now I feel like I need to read a book on all this. Did you use anything in particular? Like, did you read a lot of periodicals, old journals?
I read a lot of things from the servant's point of view. I read, a memoir from a housekeeper, a couple of different ones. There's a really good book called Servants that talks about servants and how they changed from the 1880s through the 1940s, and how, the gentry were starting to not have enough money to pay for a full staff as we moved into the 30s and 40s when the war changed things. So I read several memoirs by servants. I also have the Mrs. Beaton's book of household remedies, which is the Bible that was put out pretty much every year that the housekeepers would use for all the recipes and how to clean things. So lots and lots of research, yes.
So we're nearing the end of our chat. It's 12:27. I'd like to ask you one more question, but I have one from the audience, which is, of course, I would love to hear Colleen about her favorite Agatha Christie book and if she has a favorite Agatha Christie quote.
Oh, well, actually, one of my favorite Agatha Christie quotes is the one that we put at the beginning of the book, where it says something about, if you're going to have a body in a library, you might as well have fun with it. It's something, I'm paraphrasing, but you probably have it right there in the book in front of you. It might be in there. I think it's, I thought it was kind of ironic and funny. So, did you find it?
Right here on the front.
I'm paraphrasing.
What I feel is that if one has got to have a murder actually happening in one's house, one might as well enjoy it, if you know what I mean. And that just sets up the book so perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, even when Phyllida calls to tell the authorities that there's a dead body, the authorities are like, oh yeah, there's a dead body in Agatha Christie's house. Right, that's hilarious. They kind of joke with her on it. I don't know if I have an absolute favorite book. I don't actually, I'm rereading many of them right now, for obvious reasons as I'm writing them. I will tell you my favorite Christie character is Hercule Poirot. He's my favorite. Yeah. I just adore him, always have, read every one of his books, as I said, except for Curtain. And I love David Suchet's portrayal of him in all the BBC versions. And if you're a Poirot fan, he's just so much better than the two that they're remaking some of the Agatha Christie's right now. And they have some big name actors whose names escape me at the moment, but I just don't think they're Poirot. I really enjoy the Mysterious Mr. Quinn short stories as well. Mr. Quinn is fascinating. And if you haven't read those, they're all short stories and they have a little bit of a hint of paranormal to them, which I think is fun. One of her most brilliant books, I think, is The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. It's a Poirot mystery. It's not narrated by Hastings, where many of the Poirot mysteries are. And I think the solution to that is amazing. Many people know, Murder on the Orient Express and Then There Were None. They know those books, and those were groundbreaking, amazing solutions when those books came out. And there's a reason she's the queen of crime writing, because her stories are just amazing. So, but The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, I think, is very interesting. It's a unique one. It's very good. And then Peril at End House is another really good one. That's got a nice little twist to it. They all do. They're all good.
You love all of her books.
I do. And I love being able to reread them and call that work. It's just so much fun. I love that.
Well, both of you, thank you so much. This has been a really charming chat and Q&A. Everyone in the audience, you can go sign up for a signed ARC of Murder at Mallowan Hall in the Kensington booth. Just click the signed ARC finished book button. That'll take you to the form. And yeah, thank you for coming. This has been really nice.
And you can also request the ARC on NetGalley or Edelweiss, or if you want a print ARC, you can email me. My details are in the booth. Thank you so much, Colleen.
All right. Thank you, Colleen. Thank you, Larissa.